Where'd you go? There you
There I
are.
am.
Sweet. Awesome. Jana,
Heather!
you, you came today to talk to us about your ABC program, your Abundantly Blissful Children Amazingness. So, can you start by describing to us what that is?
Sure. So, Abundantly Blissful Children is an endeavor that I started after I found out that, guess what? We really need to bring back bliss. We've lost it. Like, our childhoods have just lost bliss. You know, it's so much of this stems from being in the classroom. Of course, I'm an educator. And it was just like academics, academics. And this is the thing, like, there's nothing wrong with academics. And you can do a really good job with academics. You can teach it and the kids can enjoy it if, if you approach it that way. And I've just seen it time and time again where it's like, we've just lost our bliss. And so, you know, it kind of stemmed from that, but I have to tell you the backstory. Would you like to hear it?
I do.
Okay. So the backstory is that um, I started deep diving into social emotional learning before social and emotional learning was cool. So before anybody else was talking about it, I was like, what is going on here? You know, like there's this whole child and we're only looking at these compartmentalized pieces.
Right.
And then I started to dig into trauma training. And it was through these experiences that I just had like this huge aha moment.
Mm.
I have a trifecta of trauma in my life. I am a product of trauma. I have biological children who I was going through just a horrendous divorce, and they were experiencing trauma. And then I was serving in a school that had free and reduced lunch population of 99%. So, you know, I was definitely in a very needy school. And
Right.
so those children were experiencing trauma. And it was like, how can we focus on learning how to read when
Mhm.
we're all in survival mode? Every
Right.
single one of us. You know, we're just all broken people walking around trying to figure it out. And
Mm.
so much of ABC, Abundantly Blissful Children, is birthed out of that process. But I think what is so powerful about this program, and you know, I'm going to change my words. This is not a program. This is a mindset. This
Mm.
is a mindset. And what is so powerful about that is understanding that all behavior is communication. And it
Mhm.
stems from one of two things. It's either a skill deficit, you know, a child just doesn't have the skills, or there's an underlying unmet need.
Mm.
And it is from those two things that it can really change our mindset to looking at a kid and going, what is wrong with you? Or even another adult for that matter. I mean, let's be real about it. And really saying, you know, what happened to you? What
Right.
happened to you? And, you know, this mindset shift is it's an expansion of that.
Mm.
Then it's going into, but how may I help you?
Right.
Because I'm the regulated adult in your life. I'm cool, calm, collected, and connected. I know how to help you. You know, how can I help you? And
Mhm.
then to take it even further, it grows into this concept that how can we use what happened to you to serve others? You
Mm.
know, there's so much thought behind if we're all here for a purpose. And I kind of have this saying, and I call these Jana-isms when I make them up. So this is a Jana-ism. And it goes like this: I trust my pulse, I trust my breath, I trust my purpose. We are
Mm.
all here for a reason. Our hearts beat for a reason, we breathe for a reason. There's all of us, every single person. And
Mm.
so a lot of times, you know, we might not know what our purpose is, but our purpose is birthed from pain. It really is. Like that's how we can serve others is by diving into our pain. Because
Right.
there's so many deep lessons there that if you didn't experience that pain, you wouldn't
Right.
have the background knowledge to share anything.
Exactly.
And so,
No.
ABC is really my service. Like,
Mm,
this is what I'm sharing from my own pain.
mm.
And so that's kind of like the background story of it.
Awesome.
To
Awesome.
sum up.
So it's a program for traumatized to be able to get yourself into a different thinking. Now you have like certain building blocks, right, that you use for the emotional learning and regulation. And I wrote this all down before. So you can you talk to us a little bit about what the go feelings are so that people can know how to begin to identify some
Yeah.
of them?
Yeah. So I think, I want to back up just a little bit if you don't mind.
Sure.
In all of this, none of this matters without one main component.
Hmm.
And that one main component is the regulated adult.
Hmm.
If you're flying off the handle, none of this works
Hmm.
because we're mirrors for each other.
Hmm.
And kids mirror us, other adults mirror us. I mean, think about it. If you have somebody who's really upset and screaming at you, what is
Hmm.
our typical natural response?
Yeah.
To holler back, you know?
Because
So that,
you give what you get, tends you.
exactly. So that is the number one thing. Number two, so much of this comes from, like I said, it's a mindset shift. So if you are a very authoritarian person, this program would be really hard for you because this whole concept is about allowing children to have autonomy, to feel how they feel, and to honor all feelings as good because all feelings are good. Feelings are telling us something that we need to do. And so now I'll go into explaining the feelings a little bit. So I was sitting and thinking and racking my brain, like, how can I best teach this to kids? And then it came to me at one point at one time, and it was like, we are going to categorize our feelings. There are pleasant feelings and there are unpleasant feelings. And all feelings are good. But our pleasant feelings have a translation that typically is just going to keep us living our best life, and doing the things that we find joyful, following our bliss, all of that. Our unpleasant feelings are good because they are indicators for us. They are telling us, I need to go do something. I need to make a choice. And so that's why I call them go emotions, because I figure it's pretty easy for kids to understand that concept. You need to go do something. You know, you're very, very angry. Your fists are like this. Are you following your bliss right now? Are you living your best life? No, not so much. But this is where that mindset shift has to come in, because when we look at all behavior as communication, then what we need to ask ourselves is this a skill deficit in this child's being? Like, do they just not have the capacity? And if
Mm,
that's the case, then as the master regulator, I can teach you
mm,
because that's my job.
mm,
Or is there an underlying unmet need?
mm.
Is there something that this child is lacking or that this child needs that is prohibiting them from
Right.
following their bliss? And so it really takes the concept of behavior and
Mhm.
it turns us into detectives.
Mm,
Like, I am going to figure this out.
mhm.
And this is the thing, we want to figure this out because we want to raise happy, better people.
Mhm.
When I walk into a classroom, and I use that as a reference because that's my life.
Right.
When I walk into a classroom and I see the teacher upset and the kids upset and this kid's crying and this kid's jumping off the walls, and believe me, if you haven't been into a classroom in any recent times, go take a look. Of course, many of us are virtual right now, but when we get back in session, just mark my words on
Right.
that. Or you can walk into a classroom and you can see an upset kid, but you also see that adult being tender and caring and compassionate. And it really does make all the difference. Now, when I'm training teachers, because that's something that I also do, When I'm training teachers, I call this out. Like, it is one thing to regulate a child. And when I say regulate, that means that when that child is not able to bring themselves under control, the
Mhm.
adult has tools and strategies to bring that child back online. You know,
Mhm.
if they're offline, they're losing
Right.
control. When they're online, they're cool, calm, collected, and connected.
Mhm.
So when you see that adult that is regulating that child, that is a
Mhm.
different experience at 8 a.m. with
Mhm.
one kid than it is at 2 p.m. with one, either that same child after you've regulated them 72 times, or it's your 109th time of regulating 6 or 7 different kids, you know? So who we are at 8 a.m. is not who we are at 2 p.m.
I get.
And so, like, we have to call that out because
Mhm.
it's not easy. It's
No.
not easy. It's
No.
hard. It is
Right.
really, really hard work.
Right.
Um, but I
And
really feel like that's the challenge. Like, that's
well,
the
it
challenge.
is. And it generally isn't in a classroom situation just one kid that's had to be regulated 109 times. It's generally multiple children having to be multiply regulated, and that's very, very draining on the adult and to maintain this, and be able to do that. So having the proper tools to be able to gear it actually, so it's like I always tell my kids, like if he's like sawing at something and I'm like, that saw needs to be doing the work. You're doing too much work right now. That's why you're using a tool. So these tools help us, use our uh, regulate more effectively, use
Yes.
less energy in ourselves, and so we're returning energy. We're returning energy. We're basically building that instead of depleting, from, because it's a challenge that, I mean, I don't have a classroom and I'm a single parent of three teenagers, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I need to regulate right now.
And this is the thing. Like, even I can sit here and be like, I teach and I have, 4 boys of my own. I
Oh,
still flip my lid at times, you know? And but
yeah.
that this is the best. You want to know what's the best?
Hmm.
Mom, you're not using your skills.
You've taught them well.
I'm like, oh man, that's the worst. That is the worst. I'll never forget, now he's 15, but
Mm,
when my kiddo was 9, we were in
mhm,
the middle of like a heated moment and I lost my cool. And
mhm.
I'm like yelling and screaming. And he turns around and he looks at me. He's like, Mom, do you think we could talk about this without you screaming at me? It was like, well, seems how you said that so calmly in the thick of a heated moment. Yes, yes, we
Yes,
can. But you're going
yes.
to have to give me 5 minutes because I need a timeout.
Right. And that is human. This is
Yes, that is
all
so human. And
human.
this is the thing, like, I want to be really clear about this.
Mhm.
This is not trying to bypass feelings. That's
Mm-mm.
not what this is. And this is
No.
not, dishonoring how you feel. I am the first person I will look you dead in the eyes. If I am not okay, I'm going to tell you I am
Mhm.
not okay. But
Right.
I'm also going to be able to say that and say, but it's okay.
It's okay.
Because it's okay to not be okay.
Right.
Now that doesn't mean I'm busting stuff or I'm throwing things. Okay, I did get mad over the holiday break. This is a true story, and I probably shouldn't share it, but I'll share it because I'm a realist. Like, let's be real about it.
Keeping
It
it
was
real.
the it was the last day before I had to go back to work, and I'm always frantic that day before we go back to school, whether
Right.
it's summer break or winter break or spring break. That day before I go back, I'm just like frantic. Well, I didn't clean out my closet, and that was on my to-do list. And there's a part of me that associates cleaning with being in a bad mood. Because
Mm,
in my history, that's what I would do. Like if I was really upset, I would just start cleaning.
right.
Well, anyway, I didn't clean my closet. And my husband said something. I don't even remember what it was, but I lost my cool. So what did I do? I went in and I gutted my whole closet. And I like threw everything out. My husband walked into the room like 20 minutes later, and like all 4 seasons of my wardrobes are just everywhere. You know, I'm a teacher. I got to dress for the seasons, you know. I mean, mounds of, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just
Right.
thrown. And I turn around and I'm like, I'm cleaning.
I'm getting rid of all of these feelings. I'm going to make them and organize them and get them right where they're supposed to be. But you know what,
Not,
though? That's what we do. It's like this manifestation, like this physical manifestation of like our internal self. So, you know what I mean? Like, we're going to go at it however we go at it, and
yeah.
man, I wish my go-to response when I was angry would be cleaning. That's not my house would be so clean.
There's like, I'm angry again. We're doing the dishes.
Tried it
Everybody get
right.
in here.
No, it does. But
Yes,
it puts you back in order.
it
When
does.
it puts you back in order. It's like, no, I have to listen to heavy metal. That's what I do. Don't talk to me. I'm going to be listening to something very rah-y, and I put the rah 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 on my head, and I just let it take me back, like kind of let all of that go through it. And then once I'm like, okay, I've kind of moved my way from heavy metal or punk rock to like something more classic. And then like I'm like, all right, like I'm in the blues, I'm in Motown, we're good. I can take my headphones off now.
I am so like that too. Like my music changes according to my feelings. Yeah, absolutely. Like you can tell what type of mood I'm in by my playlist. Like, oh, that's the type of mood. But you know, even with like the the physicality of cleaning the closet,
Mhm.
when I was done and my closet was back in order, I had flushed out a whole lot of other feelings that I didn't even realize were there. Like
Mhm.
I can like literally look in the mirror, look at you and say, I'm fine today. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, after like a big, freak out moment like that, it was like, wait a minute. I was holding on to some things that I didn't realize I was holding on. And like that outlet, even though I didn't realize it was supporting this other outlet, it did.
Right.
So, we're meant to have feelings. Like that's why
Mhm.
we're on Earth. It's actually one of the like blessings of Earth,
Mm.
is we get to have this existence where we experience all these things. And
Yes.
so, like let's celebrate that,
Yes.
Let's have a party when we're upset, a house cleaning party. But yeah, so a part of this mindset shift, I'm going to call it that versus the
Yeah.
program, because this is what we know. Programs don't change people.
Right.
People change people.
Mhm.
We are connective, feeling creatures who think,
Right.
and we change each other
Mhm.
through shared experience. And that's one of the things that COVID is really, in some ways, it's taken away that physical approximations to other people, but we
Mhm.
have found new avenues to connect.
Right.
Like would we be sitting here hosting this podcast, if COVID didn't happen? I
Maybe
don't
because
know.
we would be.
Probably,
We would
probably,
be doing
probably.
this before
But I do
COVID, and I
so
would be
many
longer after.
things. I do so many things now on the computer, like to hang out with people.
Doing more and hanging out together. Maybe we would be doing this live together over tea or something.
Oh
You
yeah,
know
that'd
what
be
I mean?
cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
it'd be a different platform. So yeah, so it comes with, first of all, that you have to have a mindset shift. If you're very authoritarian, this will be hard for you.
Mhm.
And the first part to being a regulated adult is that
Mhm.
ability to look in the mirror and call the not great parts about you not great.
Right.
Because that's how we grow, and if you're the regulated adult and if a kid spits in your face that you are going to lose your regulation, this is true, then how are you going to work through that? Because there's no way that you can be the regulated adult if that's your trigger. Now,
Right.
I'm not saying that you're not allowed to have an opinion about that, but
Right.
you're not allowed in the heat of the moment. You have to take your opinion outside of when you're dealing with that
Right.
kid.
Right.
If a kid is cussing at you, does that trigger you?
Mm.
What are your triggers?
Right.
And so, how are you going to move through that? And this is the thing. So many people, when they first approach um, this idea or this concept, they're like, that will always upset me, as it should upset me because kids should, blah, 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 blah. But if we look at behavior as communication, that child probably has a skill deficit if they're spitting in your face. They don't
Right.
have another means to communicate with you what is going on.
Right.
Or there's an unmet need there. There's also learned behaviors, you know. You know, if a 4-year-old is telling you to go F off, they're
Yeah,
not
they
saying that because they're just like, oh, go F off. They're saying that because that is what they've heard in
right.
situations that are similar to that. And so, like, for me, um, reteaching swear words is like one of my favorite things to do. Seriously, when I have a kid and he's like standing at the top of the play structure and he's like, "F you, bitch," I'm like, "Yes, give me that one." I'll get right up on that play structure. I'm like, "We're gonna yell, by golly gee, Jipperheimers," and they just look at me and I'm like, really loud. It goes like this. By golly gee. Anyway, you just do a replacement behavior. I will tell
Right.
you, there's so many times I've walked out to the playground and I see a kid yelling, by golly gee, Jipper. Like, it's better than telling your friend to go F off and, you know.
Hmm.
But really, like, that's the truth of it. That kid has a skill deficit. He doesn't know appropriate ways to shout at kids. And when you call a kid a by golly gee Jipperheimer, they laugh. It's funny,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
But then, with that, it's teaching kids very explicitly how to be good people.
Mhm.
And you do that by teaching through scenarios, like before, I would do this so much when I taught. I teach early childhood special ed now, and it's a completely different ball game. But when I taught kindergarten and first grade, so
Mhm.
much of it was like being proactive. So
Mhm.
when you go out on the playground, this is like the stuff that you're talking about in September, like the very beginning of the year, when you are on the playground and you are mad at someone, are you going to be the type of person who's like screaming and doing this? Or are you going to be the type of person who's going to build each other up? But you have to teach that. You have to really explicitly teach that. And
Mhm.
so many times adults are just walking by, don't say that, don't do that, don't be, and it's like that's not helpful, like that's just not helpful. So you have to build community.
Right.
That that is no joke. That's a tough challenge. Like, how do you build community with children who have seen the opposite of community?
Right. And then not just the I mean, we generally, period, see the opposite of community. And what's shown as value or that has value is the opposite of community. And it's an intrinsic problem. And we need to address that in order to get our kid in ourselves, in order to get our kids to be
Yeah.
able to do
So what
this,
I what I did is I broke it down into 7 different units that go through. It starts with understanding how our bodies respond to stress and teaching that to kids. And then it moves into understanding that, there's certain things that we do that are going to be more pleasurable
Mhm.
and other things that we're going to do that are going to be more unpleasant.
Right.
And talking about what that looks like. And then we talk about our will. Like, you could go outside and step on all the flowers that someone just planted, or you could water them.
Mhm.
Or the kid who falls down, you can point and laugh, ha ha, or you could help them up. But it's
Right.
really going through all these different choice scenarios and building capacity in kids.
Right.
Then we talk about the concept of forgiveness and compassion. And what does forgiveness really mean?
Mhm.
It's not, I'm sorry, that's not forgiveness, But compassion, and I have found this to be like the most rewarding lesson that I do with kiddos, is when there's a kid who's really struggling with behavioral issues in the classroom. we talk about how to address that with compassion. And so, I dissected with kids different times where we could show up with compassion when this kid is really upsetting us. Because, we're not able to do the activity, or we're not able to do this or that because we're dealing with this. And so, how can we show up to support that kid and building that capacity within the kids? And then
Mm.
talking about speaking and listening. How do you be an active listener? How do you speak with kind words? How do you do that when it's hard to do that?
Mm.
Um, and then we do a whole bunch of stuff on mindfulness, and mindfulness is kind of a catchphrase right now, like mindfulness, mindfulness. And I'll tell you, when I went on this journey of mindfulness, I would go to these sessions, and I'd be like, okay, that's what it is. But how do you teach it? How do you teach it? Like, I left session after session, training after training, PD after PD. Like, how do you teach it? And that is what this program did, is it taught people how to teach it, because it is taught.
Yeah.
Mindfulness is taught. Um, and then last but not least, this whole concept of unity.
Mm.
And how do we bring unity into our lives? And we do that through service. And it
Mm.
goes back to that original questioning that I spoke about. What is wrong with you? To what happened to you? How may I
Mm.
help you? How can you use this to serve others?
Mm.
And our unity is brought to us through that service. And
Mm.
so instilling that in kids when they're super, super young. I'll tell you one of the things I did with my kids when they were little. And I don't know where I came up with this idea, but it was probably one of my most favorite things as a parent. We would do what I called lucky days. And
Mm.
my kids never knew when it was going to happen, but they would wake up and I would say, today is your lucky day. And
Mm.
on this day, this is exactly how it went. They got to pick a place to go eat
Mm.
uh, with me. It was just me and the kid, not the other kids.
Mm.
We got to do an activity of their choice, and then we had to give back in some way. And
Mm.
so from these events, we would go to our favorite local restaurant, and then we'd go to like Bounce Land or Jungle Joe's, these little jumpy
Right.
places. And then at one time, one of my kids was like, well, let's drop off diapers at the mission. So we did
Mm.
that. We all became SPCA volunteers because that was one of the kids' things. And so we went and got trained and then went and walked the dogs and hung out with the kitties. We donated presents. It was
Mhm.
Christmas time one year. And so we went and found an angel tree and got the stuff off the angel tree and went and bought it and brought it back. But really, it was that intention that, number one, you have my undivided attention.
Right. Right.
Number two, you have all the decision making.
Mm.
And I'll tell you, my most favorite one was back when my husband and I were dating
Mhm.
and we weren't married. And he has two of his own children. I have two of my own children. It was my son's lucky day. And I said, how would you like to give back? And he's like, I want um, your boyfriend's son to come do the lucky day with us. So his future stepbrother, which I thought that was so
Yeah,
sweet,
that is really sweet.
like, oh, you want to include him?
Oh
So
yeah.
great. So yeah, here we are all these years later, and they don't ever want to include each other. No, I'm joking. They're actually really good.
Well,
Um,
but that's really important. Like what you're doing. My mom, we did it too. She called them special days, and she would like
yeah.
pull us out of school and play hooky. And my brother even wound up in the Detroit newspaper one time because he was playing at Hart Plaza. There's like a picture of him with the water falling on him like this, and it caused a ruckus actually. You're not sick. You're at Hart Plaza. But it's
But that,
so important to
yeah.
have that time that parental. I mean, I do it with my kids too, but we the part that we didn't do was the giving back part. I mean, that's just that's something else like going to the food pantry and helping out there doing community gardens or whatever like that. But I guess it never occurred to incorporate it into that. I like that like meshing together of it because it was right now it's just like girls stay and we'll go do our thing. But I like that aspect of like incorporating the service into the day. That's really nice.
Yeah. I mean, teaching unity is like kind of a really hard thing to do.
Mhm.
Because especially for kiddos, like they don't understand um, if if your child is in a I'm losing my word. I can't think of what I'm trying. A privileged state. Like they don't know that. They don't know that. And I tried really hard as a parent to like instill in my kids like this is privilege. This is privilege. Like not everybody has this opportunity or this whatever. Right over their heads for years, and still in many ways. I see the compassion a lot more now,
Mhm.
um, but I think it also comes with maturity, you know,
Right.
because if you think about childhood development, you know, there's that egocentricness
Right.
that's there. You know,
Right.
it's just there. You know, it's about me. It's about me. It's about me. And so, how do we instill that? And with boys, especially, you know, I think with girls, over my time, you know, witnessing girls, girls were, you know, either very catty or very giving, you
Right.
know, and it's like, how do we teach those catty girls to be giving and you know, how do we do that? And then there's like personalities, like let's throw that into the pot, you
Yeah.
know, some people are just
Sure.
glass half empty or
Yeah.
pure antagonist. Oh my gosh, one of my kids is a straight up antagonist. You
Mhm.
know, like he's not brutal, but by golly, he will do anything to get a rise out of you, you
Right.
know? And it's like, I remember my little guy one time, he was like, just so, he's like,
Mhm.
it never stops. And I'm like, look what you're doing to your brother. Like, look at him. He's like, ah! And he's like, yeah, I totally have built that up over like 10 years. No, don't feel proud of yourself. But yeah,
And
so, you know, like here I am. I'm telling you, like, oh, there's this thing that I do, but I'm a realist, you know, like none of this is, there's no magic wand. You
then
know, if there was a magic wand, you know, piece of cake, but there isn't. And even, oh, please go ahead.
I was just gonna it's about allowing ourselves to feel. Why are we feeling, having the feeling, moving through it? Because when we don't do that, they manifest in really wrong and poor ways. And so it's not about avoiding it's about understanding it and why it's there and using it for the tool that even the anger, you know what I mean? Like even the frustration, that's a tool. And
It
it's
is.
it's to teach you something. And if you don't go through that, if you don't go through your closet and throw everything out there and look at all of it and put it all back like that, then you might not be okay. You might not be sitting here today going, I'm okay. You might have this like frustration still, you know what I mean? That and
Yeah.
it would just it would detract from all of the other stuff you're trying to do, you
Yes.
know? So this is monumentally important to have that self-awareness and to have that ability to allow others, you know, especially kids to have that. But you know what I mean? Like and not by golly gee, whatever you gee
By golly
willikers, like
gee, Jipperheimers.
like go ahead, be pissed off, yell about it. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
don't sit in it because when we, you know, my kid just did that. He was carrying his base amp out and he like racked it. This is a big thing, you know, and he like hit his knuckle on the door, and then he's like swearing about it, you know, and I'm like, what'd you do? What are you doing? And it's like if you just if you're yelling like this, it's just making it worse. You know, it's making everything worse. And it was just like volume, like going like this at the energy in the room. And it's like, that hurt. He is angry. Like, that it hurt.
Yeah.
You know, but then my trigger is like you're yelling profanities. I don't, you know what I mean? So there you
Yes.
go. It's like we're always going to have these things, and it's like this is important to
And
stay calm.
and so much of it, it's like, yeah, so you have the anger. Yeah, you're screaming profanities. Okay, I do that sometimes when I get angry, you know? But how long are you doing it for? You
Right.
know, like, are you out of the window, like just losing your mind for, you know, however long? Or
Right.
is it like, okay, that happened. Let me get myself back
Right.
online. And I'm the type of person, I didn't know this about myself until the last few years. If I'm really upset and I'm thinking, more about like with other people.
Right.
If like I'm triggered, I have to step away by myself.
Mhm.
I have to. Like that is my coping mechanism. Give me 5 minutes, and I
Mm.
promise you, this will go way different.
Right.
And my husband's gonna love this, honey. I'm sharing another story. He's so used to it. But anyway, in the past, he could not give me that time. You
Mm.
know, it would just be like, no, we're going to deal with this. We're going to deal with it. And it never ended up well.
Right.
And now, you know, after all these years and some really good counseling, which I am a huge proponent for counseling, I
Mhm.
think everybody should be in counseling
Yeah.
if they need it at times in their life. You know, there's certain
Mhm.
times in our lives when things just, we need another ear.
Mhm.
Um, but we learned how to give me that space. And I
Mm.
will tell you, like, our marriage is so different. I just
Mm.
say, I have to have a timeout. Like,
Mm.
give me 5 or 10 minutes. And
Mm.
he gives it to me, where in the past it wasn't like that. And it just never worked out well for him. But, you know, speaking about men, like, that's a whole nother thing of this. You know, traditionally, we've not allowed boys to have feelings. It
Right.
was, you know, toughen up, you know, boys don't cry.
Mhm.
And what a huge disservice we've done for so
Right.
many generations of men,
Yeah.
you know? And I think I
Yeah.
read
We're
somewhere
subject to that because it manifests in really terrible ways.
in really terrible ways, you know, adult relationships in particular.
Yeah.
Um, I think I read somewhere that men like don't even mature emotionally until their 40s.
Mm.
You know, the developing brain stops developing it, I think, at age 26, I think,
Mm.
if I'm correct. Um, but then it to take all the way into our 40s, you know, for men to be able to dive into that work. And I don't know if that's even true. I feel like I read that.
Maybe statistically that's just what like where like the lump of like some of them do it, but
Hmm.
I don't maybe I don't know. But I'm gonna
I
say
don't know either.
I know a lot of very young men who are very mature because they're either just personality geared toward it or they've been through so much that they had to be, you know. So I there's always exceptions to every rule, so I don't know, but it
Yeah, and
does.
I will say, like, now I feel like um, our men aren't being raised to be so masculine, you know. It's our society is definitely opening up to,
Mhm.
you know, that we all have feminine and masculine characteristics, you know, whether you're male or female. We're a duality. We hold both. And
Mhm.
so that's that's beautiful to see that shift. And
It
it's so important.
definitely
It's so
is
important.
crucial.
Yeah.
It's crucial. So, can you talk about, I used one of your terms with a friend of mine, and he was like, that's brilliant. I love it. And it is, what you can name, you can tame. Do you want to
Yeah.
talk about that
Yeah.
Janaism for?
Yeah, well, that's actually not a Janaism. That is from Dr. Dan Siegel, and he is a psychiatrist, and he came up with the concept, "What you can name, you can tame." And I love that language
Yeah.
because it's true. It's like once you identify something, it's like, oh, okay, now I know what I need to do, or at least I'm aware that something needs to happen.
Right.
And the research out there states that when you are having a certain feeling
Hmm.
and someone responds to you by identifying that they hear how you feel, your body naturally starts releasing those feel good endorphins.
Hmm.
Just you know, if you're angry and you know your son hits his hand and I can see that you're angry,
Hmm.
biologically, your body starts producing those feel good.
Hmm.
Um, I lost my word. Those feel
The
good what?
chemical,
The
the,
chemicals, yeah, endorphins, serotonin, you know, all of those things, and so that's pretty powerful.
yeah.
Um, but what you can name, you can tame. I use that language to give us commonality,
Mm,
especially when teaching other adults.
right.
Um, how we can talk about this.
Right.
Because a lot of times we, as a society, and this is nobody's fault, I
Right.
want to make this very clear. This is nobody's fault. We have not been trained on
Mm.
how to be emotionally intelligent people.
No, no, mm-mm.
You know, like whatever your parents gave you is what you got. Whatever
Right.
you got in school is what you got.
Right.
And there
Yep.
was no like, this is the way to do it. You know what I mean? So when we talk about being emotionally intelligent, you know, so many people, I will be in a room with educators and I'll say, I want you to write down on this piece of paper, what does it mean to be angry? And I will tell you, it's across the board. It's across the board what people come up with. But this is the thing. Anger means something is unfair.
Right.
That's it. That is what anger means. You are angry because something is unfair.
Mm.
Um, if you are frustrated, it's because you've been doing something over and over again and you're not getting a different result.
Right.
And so, what you can name, you can tame goes back to this concept, but can you name it appropriately?
Right.
You know, do you know how to name what that emotion is? You
Right.
know, when your son hit his hand, he's hurt.
Right.
You know, that's the emotion. Anger
Mm.
is the response,
Right.
but the underlining emotion is that I am hurt. And so, and it also kind of goes back to this whole thing, you know, do we cry when we're hurt
Mm.
or do we get angry?
Right.
You know, we do both, you know,
Mm.
depending on what type of hurt it is or however you respond as a person. But that's so much of this is just bringing that commonality, um, to be able to discuss our feelings and our emotions with
Mhm.
language that we all understand. You know, if it's like teaching a child math.
Mm.
You know, what does the research say? When a child is learning about numbers, like the number 5 or the number 2 or the number 4, what is the most meaningful thing they need to know? Do they need to know the symbol? Do they need to know how to spell it? No, they need to know the quantity.
Mhm.
5 is a quantity, you know, 2 is a quantity. The symbol is just how it's represented. But if
Right.
when I say 5 to a kid, if they can't see 5 fingers, or if they can't see a dice, or if they can't visualize the quantity,
Right.
then their number sense isn't there.
Right.
You know, so it's very difficult. You have to like understand how to break that teaching down. You know, when
Mm.
I say 2, this is what I want you to see in your head. When I say 3, this is what I want you to see in your head. But when I say lonely, does that look different than sad?
Right.
You know, when I say that, what do you see in your head? And that's the commonality that just doesn't exist. You
Right.
know, we see things based off of our previous connections that we've had with it, not
Mm.
because we have a universal commonality behind it.
Mhm.
So, yeah, so much of this is about teaching. What is the universal commonality?
Well, that we all have those feelings.
Yeah,
I mean, even if they look different or represent themselves differently, every is a part of the human aspect, humanality is to have that,
yeah,
like that's it. And to be able to understand that others have this other thing going on, and you have this thing going on and I have this thing going on, and guess what? Everybody's got something going on. That's
yeah.
just
And we're
happening.
supposed to. You know, like that's so much about being alive. You know, are you even living if you don't have something going on? But you know, I guess the whole other aspect to this that we haven't touched base on that I think we should before we wrap up is so much of this is tied to our neurobiology
Right.
and how does our brain respond?
Mm.
Because number one, our brain responds differently depending on the brain state that we are operating out of.
Mhm.
So if you think, you know, we have the limbic system, we have the neocortex, we have the reptilian brain, and all of these things are charged with different things. Our limbic system is the part of our body that handles emotion. And
Mm.
our neocortex is the part of the brain, I said body, I meant brain, is the part of the brain that deals with thinking and learning and problem solving and conflict resolution. So if you are dealing with a child who is in the middle of a tantrum,
Mhm.
they are not in their neocortex. You know, they are in their limbic brain, you know, and they are fighting or flighting, going to that natural response that we do when we fall offline. And That's not an appropriate time to ask that child questions. That is a time of regulation.
Right.
Let me bring you to a cool, calm, collected, and connected space. And then once you're there, that is where, discipline takes space. This is a Janaism. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Discipline does not happen in the heat of the moment,
No,
ever,
that's great. It doesn't.
ever.
No.
Regulation happens in the heat of the moment. And then conflict resolution, discipline, all of those other things come after that connection has been made, that
Right.
calm down has been made.
Right.
And so brain science is really tied into this and teaching kids how to understand the cues within their own body that their brain is about ready to switch a system
Mm.
or that their brain has switched a system. And we have these cues. I mean, think about it when somebody starts sharing something that you would rather keep private. What happens?
Your
We
face
start
turn.
blushing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or
Hmm.
if you know someone's getting ready to yell at you because you can tell by their body language, where do you feel that in your body?
Yeah.
You know
It
what I
might
mean? Like in your chest.
exactly
In your
your
chest.
chest.
That's where I feel it. Those are our cues to tell us I'm about to leave my neocortex and flip my lid. That's also Dr. Dan Siegel.
Yep.
And then, like, empowering people
Mm-hmm.
because our brains have what's called neuroplasticity, which means
Hmm.
they can change. We can teach ourselves new pathways to doing things. And that is where the power lies. Is that,
Mm.
yes, just because you acted that way that one time or 792 times doesn't mean that that's how it is.
Right.
We can
Right.
change, and that is what regulation does.
Mm.
Regulation is literally the process of rewiring the brain to make a
Mm.
different decision.
Different connection until
Yep.
that, and if the more times you make it, the stronger that new pathway becomes until
Correct.
that becomes the uh,
More
default path.
secure. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And the other thing to be said about that, and when I do trainings on this, I always make sure to make this point. The
Mhm.
thing is, until that pathway is the new default, you have
Mhm.
to very cognitively make that decision to make that new choice.
Right.
And guess how we learn to do that? Mindfulness.
Mindfulness.
That's where mindfulness comes in. Something has happened, I am triggered. Am I taking that minute to make a different decision?
Right.
And if you don't train yourself on how to do that, you won't recognize that that's what you need to do.
Right.
And it is hard. It
Yes.
is so much easier to go the old route. It
Right.
is so much easier to go the old route.
Mhm.
Um, but is it serving you?
Right.
And is it serving those around you? And so that, you have to know what is your reasoning behind that. So yeah, I think that kind of brings it full circle. It's about understanding our brain. It's understanding what our feelings really telling us. It's having
Right.
tools and strategies to operate differently when we know that we need to do that.
Mhm.
And honestly, the whole purpose is so that we can have a more blissful society.
Right.
Like, yes, every feeling is valid and every feeling is telling you to do something. But are you functioning out of that feeling? I guess
Right.
this is a really good summary of all of this.
Okay.
You know, 40% of the time, our brain is in what we call the default mode network.
Mhm.
And when our brain is in the default mode network, we are either thinking about the past,
Mhm.
which tends to lead to depression for a lot of people, or we are worrying about the future,
Mhm.
which is a lot of people who identify with anxiety.
Right.
So 40% of the time, our brain is naturally in this default mode network, thinking about the past, worrying about the future. Mindfulness literally is the active change of bringing us into the task positive network.
Right.
And this is in the present moment. And so, how do we teach ourselves how to do that? And that's what ABC is all about. It's about teaching adult and kids how to function out of their task positive network so that we can, live more blissful lives.
Right. More comprehensive and communal lives.
Yeah, in service and unity
Yes. For one another.
for one
Because it is.
another.
Well, because okay, so when we're acting out of survival mode, we are acting out of like self-savior mode, right? Because we're
Yeah,
doing something because we have to save ourselves from this detrimental experience, this danger zone, this whatever it is. And by allowing ourselves to step back and say, hey, I'm not getting chased by a lion in the woods right now. You know what I mean?
exactly.
I don't need to go that far. I just
Well, and that brings up another good concept. I mean, we could just dive into this and dive into it. But, when the lion is chasing you, your body releases cortisol.
Mm,
Because what that does is it rushes blood and oxygen to your muscles so that you can
mm,
run faster. And this is
right.
the thing, we need cortisol. We need it. It helps us wake up, it helps us, do all these great things.
Mm,
However, when it is in abundance, it actually is very harmful to our system. It's very, very harmful. And so now we're getting into, polyvagal theory. That's what all this is about.
yeah.
Our parasympathetic and our sympathetic systems. Um, because too much of cortisol is really, really bad for you.
Well, it's just it's exactly that. Like that not only is this type of program and is this type of I don't call it rehabilitate regulation important because of communal, because of interactive, and because of social, but because your body needs you to do this.
Your
Your body
body literally depends on it.
like that's exactly the point we need to get to understanding is like you could be at work and dislike all of your coworkers around you. And if you can't be nice to them for their own sake because you want to build community, be nice to yourself. Think
Yeah.
about what doing all of this is doing to you. If and sometimes that helps if you're in survival mode and you're thinking about saving yourself, save yourself by leaving your survival mode and letting yourself go. You know what I mean? And being
Yeah.
and then you might find out you actually like some of your coworkers. You might actually
Yeah.
enjoy some of the tasks that you disliked so much before because you were so surrounded by the fear of this predator or this lion or this like falling off a cliff or whatever it is feeling that isn't really in the room with you. It's not that, you know what I mean. And if it is in the room with you, you can leave that space and enter into a healthier, more cognitive, deep breathing state so that you can realize what's actually going on around you. And I think that is really, really important because you talk about the kids, they're panicking and they don't know, or they're screaming and yelling and they don't know. And then their body is getting used to this natural state of um, heightened awareness, of
Yeah.
hypervigilance, of like all of these things, and then they're growing, and then to them that feels like a natural state. So you by showing them regulation, by showing them humor through their frustration, allowing them to scream, allowing yourself to scream and feel humor through their frustration, it makes us healthier, happier people, and then
Yeah.
we can enjoy each other and
And
help service each other, like help each other out.
and this is the thing, like wherever someone is, we just have to accept them right then and there for however long they're there for. And I'm thinking about adults mainly when I'm talking about this. A lot of people, there's things that have happened to them that it's just very hard to move past. And
Right.
so this isn't, like I said, we're not bypassing how we feel. But if you are in an unpleasant state more times than not, then that's a sign that it might be to your benefit to seek some alternative help, to learn some new strategies, to learn new skills. What happened to you, um, whatever it was, I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm sorry that happened to you. And at that same time, those of us who do get it, we're almost charged with, it's like this whole concept, you know better, you do better. And I really, really take that with me. Like I know what it's like to be angry most days. I know what it's like to be jaded and to hold grudges. I know what all of those things feel like.
Mhm.
And what I can tell you is living and functioning out of that
Mhm.
feels awful.
Terrible.
It just feels awful. And
No.
I'm not saying, like, I spent like a good few months in December, like just miserable. And well, you know this story, but I'll share it with the rest of us. I was feeling a loss, and I was like having to function through that.
Mm.
And I read this concept somewhere. It was like the opposite of holding on is not letting go; it's digestion. And I said to my husband, you know this story, but I'm going to share it. I said to my husband, I read it to him, and he's like, "What does that mean?" I'm like, "I have no idea, but I love it." And
Mhm.
I like made it my mission through this process to like figure it out. And I did figure it out, at least to make sense to me. And it's like, something happens and you have to like chew on it. And
Mhm.
then you get to a point where it's like, okay, it happened. You swallow it.
Mhm.
And then, a couple of things happen. Um, what I tend to do is I regurgitate it. Like, oh, bring it all back.
Right.
Um, but what I found through this process is that when you really digest it, you end up with a product, and my product happens to be poetry. Your product happens to be art, whatever the product is. And then I hosted a poetry night, which you attended. That was so fun. And from that, the emails or the messages, like, you reminded me how much I used to love to write. I'm going to start writing again. Or, I so identified with that, builds that community right back in. Something happened to me. What is wrong with you? You're acting miserable. No. What happened to you? Well, I suffered a loss. What can I do to help you? Like, I'm saying this to myself. Well, I know when I write, I process.
Right.
How can you use that to serve others? Well, let me share a poetry event. Like, bam, full circle.
Right. And being there, and seeing, I mean, seeing it, how many people it affected positively. How many people were watching that, watching you share. Everyone. We were all tremendously moved. We were all inspired, and we were all set free in a way by that gift that you gave us by doing that. And I think that people should do stuff like that more often, and we should do things like that for each other, and to share. You shared with us your deepest soul,
Yeah.
and we're grateful to you for that, because then that touched our soul. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah,
And
that's like what we should do as a society now. Like, oh, I'm going through this life event. When I processed it, I'm going to host this.
yes,
Like, yeah, how powerful would that be to create healing communities in that way?
actually make a marker for, it's like, not that I like discredit birthdays or anything like that, because we're happy that people are born, but like actually celebrating mile markers for accomplished emotional, mental, spiritual accomplishments, because you
Yeah.
deserve that. You deserve that. You worked hard to get where you are. We want to come celebrate that with you, and see the beauty of that and be inspired by that, and
Ooh,
to
I love that
share that
idea.
with others too. Oh, I think it's fantastic. We're on to something. We're gonna do this.
Yes, we are totally on to something.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jana, for sharing all of this and being you and doing all of this amazing work, so that the rest of us can um, learn and grow from it too. So I love you so much.
I love you so much. And we're all teachers for each other. This is just something that I happen to have to give. So thank you, Heather. Take care.
Bye.
Bye bye.